What to expect with your first DUI. Have you been charged with a DUI? Did you get stopped for a DUI anywhere in Washington State? If so, this is the video for you. So stay tuned. My name is Lance Freiber. I'm a defense attorney in Lynnwood, Washington. I have a law firm that's been defending people charged with crimes for more than 20 years, and we deal with DUIs all over the state. And we get questions from people that have been pulled over, even from friends. They want to know what to expect with your first DUI in Washington State. So I'm going to go over generally what to expect. And if you find this video useful, please like and please subscribe. More people get the information we need. So now I'm just going to jump right into it. So I'm not going to cover really all the penalties and things like that. I'll give you some of the details. We have a lot of other videos, which we're going to link to here, about first offense DUIs, about multiple offense DUIs, stuff like that. But I'm going to tell you what to expect in the broad term. How painful is it going to be? What are you going to have to do? Who's going to know about it? How is it going to feel, at least for most people? So a first offense DUI typically means you've been pulled over by a police officer, or there's been an accident, you've been contacted by a police officer, and you've probably had to take a breath test. You may have taken field sobriety tests. Your car may have been towed. Nowadays, here in 2022, sometimes it doesn't get towed. And you may have a court date already, or you may not, but eventually there will be a court date. So what you can expect, first of all, is you're going to have some paperwork. You're going to have some paperwork and you need to look at it. Do you have some paperwork to request a Department of Licensing hearing? Because if you had a breath test that was higher than the legal limit, 0.02 for people under 21, 0.08 or higher for people 21 or over, if you took a breath test that had that, you've only got 7 days as of January 1st, 2022, when I'm filming this, to request a hearing to contest the suspension of your license. If you refuse to take a breath test, you're also going to need to request that licensing hearing. You only have 7 days from the date of the event. For blood draws, it's more complicated. Make sure you reach out to an attorney. There's different rules because they may not know what the blood result is. But you need to look at that paperwork and see, do I have that form to request a hearing? If you do, you can mail it in with the fee. It's $375 nowadays. Or you can go online to dol.wa.gov to request a hearing through your Licensing Express account. So number one, what to expect is some deadlines to do things quickly. You can also look at that paperwork and see, hey, my car was towed, where is it? Right? So you can get a hold of the tow company to get your car back. You may have already done that. Or you could see, is there a court date you need to worry about? And for city police officers, you might have court immediately. And for state troopers or sheriffs, you might not have court for months. And so that's what you can expect is the paperwork that you should have, and you need to look at it. If you have questions, and regardless, you probably should call an attorney, because the DUI is one of the areas of the law where timing matters. Things need to get done quickly to give you the best chance of getting a really good result in your case. What you can also expect is to get some notices from the Department of Licensing. You're going to get at least one. If you blew over the limit or you refused, you're going to get a notice letting you know that they're suspending your license for a period of time. If it's a first offense, which is what this video is about, it's a 90-day suspension. If you had a breath test over the limit, it's a 1-year suspension if you refused a breath or blood test. And you're going to get that notice. It's going to tell you basically on the 31st day, depending how you think about it, at midnight, you have to stop driving. Now, if you've validly requested a licensing hearing, they're going to put that suspension notice on hold, but they're not going to send you anything, which is really silly, but they don't send you anything. So what we tell our clients is we want you to check the Department of Licensing website, the one I mentioned earlier, to see what the status of your license is on the date your suspension is supposed to start. Okay? And just because they cash your check or you paid a credit card online, that doesn't mean that it's all been processed perfectly. So we always want you to check. If you have requested a licensing hearing, you should expect to get paperwork eventually separate from the suspension notice, a separate mailing that sets a telephonic hearing date. And we've got a video I just did about Department of Licensing hearings. We're going to link to it here. That is a telephonic hearing. And if you don't have an attorney yet, they've probably sent you the hearing notice and the entire police report, which is the exhibit. And if you have an attorney and you listed the attorney when you requested the hearing, they're going to send you the hearing notice. They're going to send your attorney a hearing notice and the actual exhibit, the reports. So those are things that you should expect. And you're good to drive if you were good to drive before, you're good to drive until you have a notice that says you're not, right? And if you request a hearing, that first suspension notice is typically put on hold, but you need to be careful like I've described. If you did properly request a hearing, that first suspension notice is put on hold until there's a decision against you, which means you're resuspended, or a decision for you, which means they cancel the suspension. But again, reach out to an attorney. That's how it works. And there's a lot more details on our Department of Licensing video, which was released a few weeks before this. What else should you expect? Well, you're eventually going to have a court date, okay? And the first court date is going to be called an arraignment, okay? If you got arrested and charged right away, you could have been arraigned in jail, but typically you're going to have a court date called an arraignment where you enter a plea of not guilty. On a first offense, usually they're going to set standard conditions. While you are waiting for the next court date after the arraignment called a pretrial, you have to obey conditions the court set. Don't drive without a license and insurance. Don't drink and drive. Don't commit any new crimes. They might order an interlock on your car to make you drive with an interlock. But on first offenses, which is what this video is about, typically you're going to see standard conditions. You want to make sure you have an attorney by the arraignment, either a private attorney, or if you can't qualify, try to have the public defender ahead of time. You can contact the court about how to get the public defender in that jurisdiction, but you need someone representing you because it's very serious. You can also expect that you're eventually going to need to do an alcohol and drug evaluation. An alcohol and drug evaluation is where you're going to go to an agency. It's going to cost some money, think around $200, maybe a little less. They're going to ask you questions about alcohol and drug usage, and you're going to fill out the answers, and it's going to give the agency a score, and then they're going to talk to you for a little bit. Hey, what's your life like? What happened this day? What's been going on? They're going to make you take a UA, an analysis of your urine, to see if there's any drugs or alcohol in it at the time of your evaluation, and then eventually they're going to make a recommendation. They're going to need to look at the police report. They're going to need to look at your driving record. They're going to need to look at your breath or blood test results to make that recommendation. And whatever they recommend is going to be written in an evaluation. That's what's called an alcohol and drug evaluation. And we've got a video on our channel about that as well. We've done a lot of videos about some tips and tricks about how to do those. So you can search for that, or hopefully my team can also put a link in this video to that. But basically, once that evaluation has been written, if it gets filed with the court, you're sort of stuck with it, okay? And then you need to do what it says. The minimum that you're going to have to do out of a DUI is called an alcohol and drug information school. It's a little 8-hour class. There's a pamphlet they give you. You go in what the effects of alcohol is in the body, stuff like that. And you're going to have to typically also do for the court what's called a DUI victims panel. And that's usually an 1.5 to 2 hour class where you hear, you just listen to, the effect that people who have been victims of drunk drivers, the effect on their life. And, we want to take it very seriously, because I'm sure if you're in the situation, it's not something you meant to do. It's not something you intended. But so you can expect in your head, hey, at some point I'm going to have to do an evaluation. Hopefully your attorney tells you where to go, because there's some places that attorneys might, think are better for clients than others. Right? You're going to have to do an evaluation. You're going to have to take a urine test. You're going to have to do at least one class and probably a victims panel. And if the evaluation says you have a bigger problem, you'd have to do more classes. You have to do weekly classes or monthly classes. But for first offenses, typically, more often than not, depending if your breath test isn't too high, you're going to end up with an 8-hour class and a victims panel. So what else can I expect in my first offense DUI? Well, you can expect that your attorney is going to fight for you, right? They're going to try to use any legal problems with the case, any problems developed at the licensing hearing when the attorney may get to question a police officer if they subpoena the officer to the hearing. You could expect that they're going to try to negotiate the best possible result for you. There could be legal motions about whether or not the evidence was legally gained or whether or not the breath test was done right, stuff like that. The minimum penalty on a first offense DUI is a fine plus 1 day in jail if you blew under a 1.5, and it's a fine plus 2 days in jail minimum if you blew 1.5 or above. And that's if you're convicted at that level. Additionally, if you get convicted of the DUI, you're going to have an interlock for no less than a year. It's a 1-year restriction, but it could end up going longer based upon some complicated ways about removing things. And there's a new law today, January 1st, 2022, about that. We'll put out a video about that later. But basically, think about a fine, some jail time, and an interlock restriction in addition to 5 years of probation if we're convicted of a DUI. We could also get it reduced, right? You and your attorney could get it reduced to lesser charges, reckless driving or negligent driving in the first degree. Those carry different penalties, right? And I forgot to throw in there, if you get convicted of DUI, there's also going to be some type of license suspension, and that's going to vary based upon your breath test, whether it's refusal, things like that. Again, in more detail is covered in some of our other DUI videos. This is more about what to expect. So what not to expect. Don't expect, it to be dramatic going to court. Don't expect people to be pointing at you and making fun of you and making you feel bad. That's not typically what happens in court. Don't expect to really have to talk about what happened in court. Your attorney is likely going to do that for you. You're going to want to tell your attorney how you feel and get that legal and emotional support from your attorney. A good attorney should provide both because it's super stressful going through this, but you shouldn't expect to be, have the shame bell ringed on you while you're in court. Everyone else's court is dealing with their own things. Nowadays, during COVID times, court is mainly by video anyway, so you might be sitting in your own home and logging in and then logging out when you're done, right? So it's a lot less dramatic than it used to be. You also should not expect to ever see the police officer, right? You probably won't see the police officer again. Very few cases end up at legal motions with the police officer testifying. Even fewer cases end up at a jury trial in the DUI area because there's usually a breath test result, right? Sometimes they're not, and some will go to trial, but a small percentage. So those are things that you shouldn't expect. Finally, hopefully finally here, what should you expect about how long it's going to take, right? How long does a DUI take? Well, once you're charged, we would say 3 to 6 months for most courts until you get a resolution. Sometimes a little slower due to COVID. It could be more 3 to 12 months until you get a resolution. If you end up with a fine, you're not going to need to pay it all right then. If you end up with a fine, you're going to be on a payment plan with the court. They might give you a couple of years to pay any fines. If you end up with a suspension, you could expect you may still be able to find a way to drive legally through something called an ignition interlock license, right? We've got a video on how to get ignition interlock licenses as well, but it's a form you need to get from Department of Licensing. You need to follow the instructions. Nowadays it costs $100. You have to have an interlock, a blow and go to start your car. But, you can expect that you're still going to be able to drive legally if you're careful and do the right things. And so, that's some of what you could expect in your first offense DUI here in Washington State. So if you've been pulled over or you've been charged or you're waiting to be charged, get ahead of it, right? By getting an attorney quickly, there's things that the attorneys can do. There may be breath test room video that can be maintained, that could be preserved, that might show the breath test wasn't done right. Right? You can get your evaluations and things done early so you look better to the court and look better to the prosecutor. You can make sure you get that licensing hearing requested, right? So we can try to gain some evidence and maybe protect your license. We can win a lot of those. Lots of attorneys can. So just don't put your head in the sand. Don't give up. I always tell everybody, at least the people that come and see us, a first offense DUI assuming, it was just a regular DUI, no big accident and not a felony. The first offense DUI is inconvenient. It typically will not wreck your life. It's criminal traffic. There's way less stigma in a first offense DUI than some other types of crimes like domestic violence or theft or drugs. So have hope. So I hope you found this video useful. If so, do us a big favor to like and subscribe so more people will get this type of help. And if you're in this situation and you personally need some help, feel free to reach out to my firm. Again, we've been defending crimes like this for more than 20 years. If you give us a call, we'll listen to what happened, we'll identify a way forward, and we'll be there for you. Thank you.